Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Brokers Open Podcast. I am Dr. Ben Spears, the king of flow.
The king. Oh, here we go.
I changed it, right? I was the ambassador. I'm the king now. The king of flow. I'm here with the big guy, as usual, Matt Vibe. Matt, we got an amazing guest. But before we get to the guest, we always have to answer the question.
Is that the king of big guys?
No, you're like the jester. We always have to ask the question that is on everyone's mind, man.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Doing fantastic. Until that jester remark, Ben. Come on now.
Yeah, right. So,
is that how you're going to treat me on Valentine's Day?
Yeah, so you guys just know, right? 500 podcasts in a row, Matt's doing just fine. So let's bring on our guest so that she can join the conversation. Super excited about her being here. We have Stacey Brown Randall, the podcast Roadmap to Grow Your Business, right? So, once she comes on, I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to let her take over, right? She's the podcast extraordinaire. So, Stacey, how you doing?
I am doing just fine.
Wonderful, man. Wait a minute, guys. I appreciate you listening to the show. And
I'm sorry. I can't leave it there. I am doing great. I'm actually very excited to be on, but I wanted to be like Matt for a minute.
There we go.
We all do.
Right.
That's the thing, Stacey. We all want to be like Matt. So Stacey is an expert.
Yeah.
When it comes to generating referrals. Obviously, all of our listeners out here are real estate agents, and so you're going to want to hit that screen record button or make sure that you like this podcast because as you know that we are all about relationships, and that's really what we're going to really dive into in here today. So Stacey, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got where you were. I know that you said you've done some things in your past life. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's always nice to spend a little bit of time where I don't have to introduce myself as I'm Jacob, Danny, and Mackenzie's mom, right? Like, it's always nice to be like, oh, wait, no, they want to talk about the things that make me brilliant because parenting does not necessarily make me brilliant. No, but thank you for having me on today. I'm excited to be here. I think that I would love to be able to tell you a story where I just woke up one day and God was like, okay, Stacey, now you're going to be brilliant when it comes to referrals. And not only you're going to be brilliant, you're going to also be a contrarian at the same time. But that is not how it went. That is not how the story goes. I actually had a first business and it was an HR consulting firm. And that business made it over 4 years, but not quite to the 5-year mark before it actually failed. And I found myself back in corporate America. And I tried to figure out I was actually good at what I did. I was great taking care of my clients. It was the getting enough clients was always kind of the issue and to why that business was not sustainable for the long term. And I remembered thinking back when that business failed, like, how am I can't stay in corporate America. So what am I going to do to make business number 2 different? And it was everything from the School of Hard Knocks and deciding that I was going to be successful and not end up with my second badge in the business failure club, that I was going to, I didn't need to be the president. I was a member. That was all I needed to be. And so I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to figure out this whole business thing and growing it and making it consistent, because it wasn't that I couldn't turn people into clients. And it wasn't that I couldn't do great work and have amazing results. It was do you have enough people to talk to turn the right people into clients? And so it was filling that prospecting pipeline, which it doesn't matter what you do. It's every business owner's responsibility to figure that piece out. Whether you grow to a point where somebody else is responsible, you still have to figure it out in the beginning and keep it going for as long as you decide to be in business. And so for me, when I looked back at my first business and I was starting my second business, I was like, well, where did my clients come from? And I was like, oh, snap, not one single client came by a referral. But I was like, but that's the best way to grow your business. Actually, the only referral my first business received came 2 years after I'd already shut it down. And so I was like, probably going to do something different here. And it really was, I was throwing spaghetti on the wall. When I started my second business, I was like, and that was a productivity and business coaching practice. I was like, we're just going to throw some spaghetti on the wall. I'm going to figure out how to make referrals work for me, make business work for me. But I just wanted to be different with how I was going to go about generating referrals, because, and every agent knows this, and I have a stint in my past where I was a part-time real estate agent. I know every agent who does it as they're living hates it when another agent's like, well, I did it part-time, because it is so much more than a part-time anything, right? But I just remembered back on like growing that business and then starting my HR consulting firm and then starting my coaching practice, figuring out this referrals piece, but doing it in a way that I would actually want to do it. And I believe, particularly in the real estate world, folks are over taught how to generate referrals. And they're typically taught some very specific strategies like how you ask for them or how you compensate for them. And I don't mean real estate agent to real estate agent. I mean like the behind the scenes kickback stuff, right? That we really shouldn't be doing. Or they're taught, if it's not asking or compensating, it's networking to know a ton of people and how many, it's like, oh, everyone's saying, oh, I got that referral because I was at the right place at the right time. And I'm like, do you know what it actually means to be at the right place at the right time? It means you're at all the places all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And that is exhausting, a way to grow a business, particularly if you have kids and stuff, or just anybody who needs you around. Yeah. And so without the asking, without the compensating, without the networking to know a ton of people, or the hope strategy and just hope referrals show up, I was like, I want to get them in a way that I will do it consistently, but actually it needs to work as well. So when I started my second business, I was like, well, let's just see how much spaghetti we can throw on the wall and figure out. And it's kind of a compilation of the psychology behind referrals, the brain science, some of the like social economic piece that kind of come into place about why and how referrals happen and what their real definition is and really what it looks like, and then how you actually create more of those. And when I figured that out, like everything changed. And my first year in business as a productivity and business coach, I got 112 referrals. Wow. And I never asked for, right, or had to do any of that stuff that people don't want to do. Consistently maintain that even as I shifted my business away from the coaching and fully into teaching people this referrals without asking strategy. We're in 11 different countries all around the world. I am pleased to say, I work with real estate agents in Singapore. Like, so it really is. Yeah, this idea that I think the industry is hungry for something that's a little bit different that may work with who they are. And that's what I provide. If you love to ask for referrals, I'm like, then go, but I'm not your person because I'm going to teach the people who don't want that.
Right. Yeah, that's so critical. Everybody finding their place in how they're going to do business and prospect. So that's killer that you're on here talking about that. So we talked a little bit before we hit record, right, about the database, and that's kind of a fundamental place that people have to kind of start, right? They have to pay attention to what's going on with their database first. Can you made an incredible point. I don't want to ruin it, and I don't want to say it the wrong way. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that the real estate agent and their database is thought like it's taught 32 ways from Sunday, right? I mean, I just think it's like there's so many different companies that teach it different ways, and there's different sales trainers and sales coaches in the real estate world that teach this whole concept of the database. But every single real estate agent that I have had the opportunity to work with in one of my programs, they all have the same light bulb moment. And that light bulb moment is how they've been taught to look at their database versus the reality of what their database actually is. And I will never forget, I was working with a Keller Williams agent out of Oregon. And she's like, well, I was like, tell me about your database. And she was like, well, I've got them all listed as clients. And I was like, whoa, you've made money on all of those people? Like, wow, they're all clients. She was like, well, no. And I was like, well, then why are you calling them clients? And she was like, well, that's just what I was taught. And I was like, but are they clients? She's like, no. And so I started breaking down ways to think about your database. And personally, you can call your database whatever you want to call it. For my area within your database that I care about, it is your ability to identify who are actually your referral sources. And your referral sources can be clients, and they can be contacts, and they can be your neighbors and friends. But at the end of the day, they are people who have referred you another potential client. And that group needs their own label within your database. And it is amazing to me how many people are like, well, I just kind of group them all together as like, in my network, right? And I kind of do the same things from a marketing or prospecting perspective to all of them. And then somewhere muddied in that, or I'm also doing things to get referrals. And I'm like, no, like at the end of the day, who's referring you is a dedicated label within your database. And what you're going to do to take care of those referral sources is a dedicated plan, very, very separate from your marketing and your prospecting. And it's like when those two light bulbs go off and they're like, oh, I see it differently, then what I'm teaching them all make sense. Until that light bulb though goes off, what I'm teaching them, they just naturally intertwine in the client prospecting marketing mix. And I'm like, nope, I have to keep pulling them back and be like, nope, we're over here talking about existing referral sources, people who've referred you a client, a potential client, whether they became a client's irrelevant, but they've referred you someone who could have become a client. So they're an existing referral source, or in some cases, they're a potential referral source because you'd love to get referrals from them. Those groups of people have to be treated differently than the rest of your prospecting and marketing piece within your database.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I'm glad you shared that with us, but I want to dig into that just a little bit because it is such a good point. So, and I know this has to do with how much business they individually want to do and what phase of the business they're in and everything. But what would be a good number of people that are sending referrals to them? Of course, as much as possible is the answer, right? But what's a good number of how many people they should be looking for in order to get at a certain level of business? Like if you have 50 people doing this, you're gonna average this many transactions, and when they're being efficient with it, how much does that go up, and how many relationships can they maintain? Talk to us a little bit about how those numbers look and how they progress as they get better at doing what you coach them through doing.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the number of people that you need referring you, so the number of referral sources that you need is going to be actually directly linked to your closing ratio in terms of how many people that are referred to you, you ultimately end up closing. But without digging into individual agents, looking at it from a different perspective of like, well, I have a 30% close ratio or an 80% close ratio. I mean, that's a big swing, right? In terms of then how many people do you need referring you? I always tell agents a good rule of thumb is you're probably going to want at least 24 referral sources. So if you are on a team or you are going for massive volume, that is obviously not going to be enough, right? But for an agent that is definitely looking that if at a minimum of 50% closing the referrals that they do receive, if you've got, 20 to 30 people at 24, that, 24 number of folks referring you at a 50% close ratio, that's going to put you around 12 deals in a year. Obviously, we want some referral sources who are giving us way more than one a year, right? So there's obviously that. And then there's always going to be some who can only give about one a year and sometimes one every other year. So there's a lot of variables that go into it. One of the first things we do when somebody is working with me, it's actually one of the things I talk about on my podcast, usually the first episode of every year. So they can go back and find the first episode of this year. Do not remember the number. We're almost at 200 episodes. I just don't remember all the numbers anymore. But, we talk about your referral explosion. Like, what does it look like to get the number of referrals you want in a year? And then figuring out, well, how many of those will you close? And then how does that back into the number of referral sources you need, a number of referrals you get? And there's a formula that we follow. And so I tell most agents what you're looking at is how many referrals did you receive last year, the year before, and the year before that. So let's just say, for sake of argument, we're talking about folks who've been in business at least 3 years. We want an average number of referrals received over the last 3 years. That's typically what you can receive without doing anything different, because it's an average, right, of what you have received over the last 3 years, as long as your referral sources are still active and they're still sending you people. Usually then we're like, but how many do you want to receive? And we back into, obviously, like, what does that look like? How many transactions do you want to do, right? What type of ideal buyer or listings do you want based on, home price and that kind of stuff from a commission perspective? And then we figure out what they want. And then there's always a gap. I can get 10 referrals a year, but I really want 30, right? And so then we look at, okay, there's a gap. What are you going to do different to close that gap? It's funny. I was working with an agent that's in Kansas, and she usually received on average about 12 referrals a year. It's not terrible, right? I mean, that's depending on the price point, right? 12 referrals a year in LA would be, you're a millionaire, welcome, right? Middle America, not so much. And so it really just depends on what you're looking for. She got 12 referrals on average a year. And she was like, I just love to double that. I'm like, I would love for you to do that too, because you need to. She got 11 referrals in the first quarter of the year, which resulted in $75,000 in commission based on the ones of those referrals that she closed. So she did in one quarter what she had been doing an entire year before, because she paid attention to what her average is, and then she realized where she wanted to go. And then she started doing different things to get there. But it is very subjective to the person, but typically couple of dozen referral sources, giving you a couple of dozen referrals, and then what that looks like, growth trajectory is big. But if I'm dealing with somebody with a 30% closing ratio, one of the strategies that we're going to deal with is, well, we've got to close more.
Right.
And so there's a specific strategy that I teach to my clients on, like, how are you closing them in that first meeting and the conversation that you're having with them and what that looks like, which only works for what I teach, right, to referred prospects. But there's things we talk about on quality. Are you getting the right quality from your referral sources, which impacts your closing ratio? And then, of course, what does your closing ratio look like? And then how well are you closing those prospects too? So even one big strategy will have nuance, situational strategies that come out of it.
Yep. And I have to ask the question, right? So I always put myself in this, in the seat of the listener. I'm not getting ready to ask you, what is your secret sauce, right? So that's just, don't worry about that. Sorry, guys. But what I am going to ask is, let's say, you're an agent and like your whole business has been around like purchasing leads or something like that. And you're like, gosh, I just, I hate having these, quote unquote, bad leads. I really just want to start trying to generate things from my sphere of influence. Right. It's really easy to say, and maybe that's just the right thing to do. Like, well, go to your cell phone and start, looking at everybody that's in your cell phone, right? Like that's a very common, first step when you talk to a lot of people with the sphere. But if I'm an agent and I say, you know what, I'm resonating with Stacy's message, I want to start taking my business in that way. I don't have any history of getting referrals. Like, give us maybe that first step, right? Those baby steps that maybe someone can take so they actually get somebody in their database, to start labeling them, correctly.
Right. As a referral source. Yes, absolutely. It's funny. There are three main strategies that I start with that I believe every business owner needs to understand. If you want to build a referable business, there are three foundational pieces. Two of them are specific to what exactly you're talking about. Is the person who is like, I don't have any referral sources and I want some, or I'm so new in the business, it wouldn't make sense that I would have any, right? Or I need more. Like, I got a couple and that's great and I love them, but I need more. I mean, the first strategy we always teach is the existing referral source strategy, because it's every business's low hanging fruit. And if you have people referring you, I want to leverage that as quickly as possible to allow you to start generating more referrals, because I also know that'll give you momentum to do the other two strategies, which do take a little bit more work. And that's just the reality. But the second strategy I teach is actually the potential referral source strategy. And that strategy is based around, it's not everybody in your database. It's not everybody you're connected to on LinkedIn. It's not every client you've ever worked with are going to refer you. I know we would love to believe that they all will. They just don't. So we have to stop chasing that. And the very first thing we do within that potential, right, what we call the soon to be referral source strategy, the very first thing you have to do is you have to identify them correctly. And so one of the things we talk about is, well, how do you identify before you can even cultivate somebody into a referral source, right? How do you identify the right people? And so for an agent, it's going to look a little bit different based on who they know and what that network of theirs looks like. And so we teach things specifically about, okay, so here's one example. Low hanging fruit for an agent that wants to take someone who's never referred them and wants to properly identify someone who has a better chance of referring them. Doesn't mean they will, but you definitely have a better chance of them referring you, is to look at anybody who's ever given you a testimonial and been willing to put their name on that testimonial, whether that was through Zillow. That may be a word we're not allowed to say on the show, so I apologize if it is. I know some people have very strong opinions about all those folks in the real estate world, but maybe they've given you, right, it's on Google, right, you've gotten a testimonial from them, or they've given you feedback about how much they've loved working with you. Like, that's an easy identification of someone who probably has potential to refer you. Then the strategy we're going to teach you to cultivate that person into a referral source, this is not like in 30 days, you're going to have them referring you. This is an investment that you're going to take in that relationship. And that, because at the end of the day, for me to think about referring you, you have to impact how I feel about you. Yep. And once you impact how I feel about you, you can then direct how I think about you. And that's the strategy we teach, the language piece, the referral seed language that we use when it comes down to generating referrals. So, and it is a strategy where I always tell folks, like this is one that you're going to work and be consistent with. But when people are like, hey, I added 12 new people referring me this year, It didn't just happen in 1 month.
Right.
It may have taken an entire year to have 12 new people give them referrals, and then they can get 12 more referrals from those folks or more than the year after. So it is the identification piece. And we do look at it from that perspective. It's not all your clients. It's 20 to 30%. Like, what is that number of the clients that have the better potential to refer you? And we have some categories or some labels we tell folks to think through. But I think for any agent listening, like the low hanging fruit, the easiest place to identify a client that could refer you is anyone who's told you how amazing you are.
Right.
Or anybody who's actually put their name on it and put it out there in social media or out there on some type of testimonial or review type platform, is a great place to start. And then there's one more, and that's the third strategy that I teach. And that's actually having a referable client experience. And that's a two-parter. And this is for anyone, right? But at the end of the day, you actually need to like be worthy of being referred.
Yep.
You really have got to have a client. And we teach the client experience as two parts to the formula. There's the work that you do. So we call it the work touch points. And then there's the relationship that you're building through your relationship building touch points as well. And most people focus on being amazing. If I am amazing as a real estate agent, of course they're going to want to refer me. I'm like, not so much.
That's
You
right.
can be amazing and then wonder why the heck aren't they referring me? They say how much they love me because they're not thinking about you in that way. And so you've got to do the work and you've got to build a relationship. And so building a client experience that makes you referable is really important. The second piece to that referable client experience is digging in and paying attention to the moments when a client is probably more likely to start thinking about referring you and really using those moments from that perspective to deepen that relationship. But still, throughout all three strategies that I teach, I'm never going to teach you to ask. I'm never going to teach you to be promotional and gimmicky. I'm never going to teach you to do something that goes against your brand reputation. I'm not going to teach you to like just constantly keep hammering people until they give you a referral. We do things from a subtle perspective. If asking for a referral is growing in the front door, everything I'm going to teach you is going to go in the side door, which means we may need to be a little bit more patient. But when it works,
Right.
it works. And then it's amazing in terms of the long-term impact this can have on your business.
Yeah, that's huge. And you're talking about messaging too. A big part of that is, how you say something is going to make all the difference in the world. So I love that you're talking about the importance of messaging and the two, and you broke it down into two phases of what's going on in the real estate transaction. Because I think a lot of agents, going back and looking at it, because it's such a great point, a lot of agents are really good at maintaining the relationship in the transaction. And maybe sometimes they don't do as good of a job on the actual transaction, or vice versa. They do a great job on the transaction and maybe don't really take care of the relationship as well as they could. So you teaching them to make sure that they balance both of those and having a plan for balancing both of those. Absolutely. I'd see that could just make referrals explode. I mean, that's such a great point, Stacey.
Yeah. And I think it's really paying attention to the stages your client goes through when they're working with you. And I think it's one of those things that I always tell this to, this goes for anybody, but really it seems to work for real estate agents, interior designers, and divorce attorneys, where you just don't control the things that are out of your control. You just don't control a multiple offer situation, right? You just don't control as an interior designer the fact that couch that you wanted is on back order for the next 32 years, right? And you just don't control how the other side's going to respond in a divorce situation, right? So it's also how you identify and address those things in those moments, I think really impacts how somebody feels about you and being prepared for that. But the number one thing I teach throughout all three of my strategies is we're building a referral experience for our existing referral sources, our potential referral sources, and for our clients going through our client experience. But at the end of going through that client experience, but at the end of the day, that referral experience, what you need to hear is process. That's what everything comes down to. Is this is a process that you're going to work. Some of it will be automated, some of it will be manual, but you've got to work the processes and get those in place so that you can deliver on these things for the people who you ultimately want to get referrals from.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
go ahead.
No, so changing it up just a little bit, because I love everything that you're going through. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, right? So people, if people are listening and they're like, hey, this is really resonating with me, this makes a lot of sense and everything. What do they kind of expect if they tune into the podcast? Do you have guests on that talk about this? Do you go through the different stages? Tell us a little bit about what they can expect from that.
Yeah. So my podcast is a little bit, I don't know if I would call it like an anomaly or a unicorn, but I do think it's a little bit different in terms of most of my shows are solo based shows and I'm teaching every Tuesday. So every Tuesday, a new podcast episode comes out. I do have guests on, but it's typically never more than once every 2 months. And usually it's to inform a point or to share something that I want to go deeper on. And sometimes it can be someone I've done work with, or sometimes it can be just an expert in another space. But my show is solo based. You're going to hear me. I will get on soapboxes and I will get on rants from time to time. Just putting that out there for people. Like you either love it or you don't. Oh, is that what Matt does? Yes. Well, I always tell folks you're either going to love me or you're going to hate me, and either is fine. But if you hate me, stop tuning in because I'm just going to annoy you. And I don't want to hear your comments in that regards because it is working for the people it's supposed to be working for. But, at the end of the day, my podcast is about helping people understand that this is possible. So many times I'm told, Stacey, you're going against decades old advice in lots of different industries about how referrals can happen. And I'm like, I know. And that means I'm trying to help people like overcome some deeply rooted and deeply beliefs around, I have to ask for a referral. And if I won't ask, it's my fault and I can't get any. No, that is not true. And I will show you why it's not true and how it's not true. And I won't just say, because I say so, like I do to my children. I'll dig into like the brain science and the psychology behind it. And I'll show you and talk to you about strategies and stuff. And then of course, right, obviously there are programs behind that to support the folks who want to go deeper with me. But the goal of our podcast is it's really just to dig into the things you need to know, because the truth is, at the end of the day, if I had what I teach now with my first business, without a shadow of a doubt, I know it never would have failed. I'm so thankful that it failed because it's got me to where I am today, right? But without a shadow of a doubt, I know it wouldn't have failed if I could have run my business in the way that I'm teaching people to do it now, and been doing this now almost a decade. So the idea of that is that I want people to know that it's possible. And that's what I show up every Tuesday with a new episode on the podcast, which is Roadmap to Grow Your Business.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I hear what you're saying about decades worth of people doing things a certain way. And the cool thing is, and it's also the kind of the confusing thing, right, is some of what people have been doing for decades absolutely has a place in what to do now. But some of it is just so far out of date. You just have to move on from it. And unfortunately, people get a little bit of success with certain things. And so they automatically assume the other things that they're doing are going to continue working the way that they have in the past, and they're just not moving forward on it. So I love the fact that you're getting out there and getting in people's face on Tuesday. I think that's excellent.
I don't know if everybody else loves it, but I do.
That's right. And it's the right thing for them. So, there's that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions, a couple more questions for you. Before we wrap, one of them is going to be how do people get in touch with you, right? So we want to make sure that the people who are like, man, I'm struggling, and it's Tuesday. What am I supposed to do? Right. We want them to know how to get in touch with you. First question I have is: should any of our listeners, be Yankees fans? Is that something that you would still, maybe work with them, or is that like they shouldn't even waste their time?
We do not discriminate against anyone, including the diehard Yankee fans. Go Red Sox.
Exactly. So I love that. So, tell us, right? Anything, everybody, the listeners, the routine. Anything she says here, I'm going to put it in the description below. But tell us the different ways to connect with you. I know you have a website. I know obviously you have an email address because you're a human being. And you're on social because I've connected with you there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always tell folks the best home-based place to connect with me is going to be on the website, because from there you can find my email and you can find out about my book and the podcast. And if we're doing like a live challenge or some training, on-demand training that we have available, articles, everything kind of exists on the website, which is staceybrownrandall.com. And Stacey is spelled with an E. So staceybrownrandall.com. That's the best home-based place to kind of find information on me and to get to all the things that you could potentially want to know as you decide to go on this journey of how to generate referrals differently.
Yeah, perfect. And I know on that website that you also have a Referral Ninja quiz, right? Matt's like a black belt in like everything, right? So I don't know if he's a Referral Ninja yet. I want to know this. right? We'll see. If
Well, I will tell you, you can't be a Referral Ninja black belt because that level doesn't exist. And I know everybody who's ever done like any type of martial arts or we have Referral Ninjas, and they wreck it, and they have colored belts, and they obviously represent different levels. And there's 3 different levels of our Referral Ninjas, but there's no black belt level. And people who do martial arts are like, I don't understand. Like, do you not know what you're doing? And I always have to give my disclaimer when I talk about this. I'm like, I picked the colors I liked. And you can do that when you're a business owner. You can make decisions like that just don't always follow all the rules. So we actually picked our brand colors that take you through the 3 levels. So our Referral Ninja Master level belt is actually red. It is not black. But I don't know, Matt may be a Referral Ninja Master. He'll have to take the quiz to find out. But if you can find it on you can find it on the website. And of course, you can link to the quiz directly on the show notes page. That would be great for people. It's 9 questions. It's super simple. You have to be honest though, if you want the true results of like, where are you? Because what we'll do is when you find out, are you a Referral Ninja beginner, or are you a Referral Ninja master, or are you in between? And then if you're a beginner or any of the other levels, that's not the master level, we will tell you exactly what you need to do to close the gap.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I have to know what the other 2 colors are. That's how my,
yes.
how my brain works, Stacey.
Okay, so the Referral Ninja beginner is a green belt. Because everybody can be a Referral Ninja beginner. And that also means that you want to learn more as well. And then we've got our Referral Ninja in training, and that's our blue belt. And then our Referral Ninja Master, and that's our red belt, because red is actually my favorite color, even though my dominant brand color is green. So that's how they kind of work together.
Okay.
Gotcha. Well, I love it. Matt,
It's bothering me. I'm sorry, Stacey. It's bugging me.
I know it's fine.
I know.
I can just see it in his eyes.
I know. And I it's funny, like I stand on stages in front of huge audiences, and I do a lot now, obviously a lot of virtual events. And I always just put it in there because I know the martial arts folks are like, what is her problem? And I'm like, it's colors I like. You got to bless it and release it and let it go.
That's right.
Like, or it'll bother you. Yeah.
Well, I got a brown leather belt. That's not the only belt I have. So I'm going to go take the quiz, see what color I am, and then that'll give me 2 belts. And whatever it is, I'm going to wear one just to irritate Matt.
Just 2. Yes.
So guys, Stacey, we want to thank you once again for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom. We'd love to have you on again. I think that would be absolutely amazing, because I know I have a bunch more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. Matt, is there anything else that you want to add before I put a little bow on this?
We could talk about this for hours. I absolutely love it. And I love how you're digging into a piece of the business that people have to pay attention to if they're serious about any kind of long-term growth. One of the things that's happening with the population of real estate agents, there's some younger people getting into it, of course, but there's also older people that have been in the business for a while, and some of them are going to be looking at transitioning out of the business. They're going to be planning on exiting the business. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about is actually going to help them have more value when they make that transition. Right. Yeah. What you're talking about is them having a database that actually has some horsepower to it. So if anybody's out there and they're in that place in their business, and they're thinking, okay, maybe in the next 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, I might transition out and sell my book of business, or I've got a team and I might, turn this over to some of the team, and I want to be able to get some of the value out of this, of what I've built over years and years. If they're not doing something like this, they're not going to be able to get that return out of it. They have to be paying attention to the referral portion of this, and the people have to be connected with them a certain way in order to send these referrals, because most of those purchases are not a check, as all of maybe the listeners do or don't know this, but when someone buys a database from someone else and they're going to transition that business, it's not about writing a check. It is about a small check, and then a lot of checks along the way until that happens. So that means the referral business has to be there. If anybody is contemplating that at all, absolutely, I think you have to get in touch with Stacey and take a very serious look at the real value of your database, or otherwise you're not going to get the return out of it that you've earned over some people decades of being in the real estate business.
Yeah, and we actually address that in one of our next level strategies is when you are transitioning the business to somebody else, how do you also transition the relationship that you have with your referral source as part of that handoff? So I would say to anybody who's thinking of purchasing someone's database, that has a lot of referral sources, that has done the work to make sure that their business is referral based, then don't just assume all those people will just all of a sudden start referring you because you are taking over the practice. They won't. And there is a specific way that we teach folks. It's not like a strategy you learn when you first start with us, but it is one of those strategies that ultimately you've got to know if you're going to transition the business over, whether you're transitioning it to your child, right? Or you're transitioning it to somebody that's not part of your family at all. Those relationships are based on you, but there is absolutely the right way to transition them over to the new person in charge.
Yeah. I love that.
Yep.
Man, I'm gonna transition on mine to Matt.
And just make those commission checks.
Stacey, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, absolutely a pleasure. And you're absolutely you're a green, blue, and red delight.
Never been called that before, but I appreciate it.
I try and think of something different, right? So,
It was very good, very clever. I liked it.
so guys, wherever you're listening to this, make sure you hit that follow button, whether it be iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, any of those platforms. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell that we're all just having fun. Make sure that you hit that red follow button, that bell right beside of it. You get notified every time we drop a new episode. Go to brokersopenpodcast.com, sign up for our monthly newsletter. We send you just some amazing things on how to grow your real estate business. Stacey, thank you once again for coming on. I can't thank you enough. And we have amazing guests just like her come on this podcast all the time. We're so grateful for all of our listeners as well. Matt, Brokers Open Podcast. It is not just about open houses.
It's about open minds.